I'm Rebecca Oliver Kaplan, and I'm with Comics Beat, thanks to our sponsors, Mad Cave and Global Comics. And I'm with Roddenberry and Trevor Roth, Roddenberry Entertainment. And we're here to talk all things Trek animation, I think, 'cause it's the 50th anniversary.
That's right.
Of one of my favorite series, actually.
So I watched it probably, I don't know, for the first time when I was 30 and was blown away by the storylines. I thought, I'd always heard it was kind of crap. I'd kind of seen it, and I was like, oh, the animation kind of sucks, but it reminded me of when we watched Justice League and stuff like that. Anyhow, but the storylines were fantastic. They had an episode that dealt with the devil, which I thought was like mind-blowing when I finally watched it.
I also like the Devil episode. I mean, that's something you couldn't have in kids' TV today, and
Turns out, misunderstood alien.
Yeah.
You know?
Happens.
We should tell the church.
Yeah.
You should tell the church.
Yeah.
I mean, it would change our world. I do want to talk about Comic-Con a little bit, too, since we are here at SDCC. And I know your family has a long history with Comic-Con, and so I want to know if you have any special memories.
Well, I don't know if it's a special memory, but Trevor, I think you remember, we found a letter. Didn't we find a letter from Comic-Con? But it was like the third Comic-Con or something like that. And they sent a letter to my father requesting if he would come. And of course it was, handwritten, and it was very personal because back then, I don't know how many people showed up, but it was obviously much smaller. And I remember seeing this and going, oh my God, this is so cool.
I think also like the lineup was like ridiculously impressive by what we would think of today's standards. So it's like your dad, like Arthur C. Clarke, maybe Isaac Asimov, like all of them in one place.
Less movie celebrities and more comic book sci-fi.
It was crazy impressive.
That's really cool. That would be something for a museum.
If we find it, we'll send it to you.
There you go.
Awesome. And then, do you have any special memories you'd want to share, Trevor?
No, I mean, I think that Comic-Con, I have lots of memories of Comic-Con. We've now been coming for a very long time. And I think to us, the spirit of any convention is what we get to enjoy, whether it be Comic-Con or a Star Trek convention. The idea of people getting together because they love something enough and have found a community in it is what we get to both expect and relish.
Because we didn't really have conventions until Star Trek.
I think that we know of a convention that we believe might have been the first convention in '72, which was in New York, and it was a Star Trek convention. And I will definitely say that Gene took a lot of time to encourage and nurture fandom because he appreciated that and recognized, I think, the power that fandom can have.
And he would directly correspond to letters sent to him. He would write back.
Yeah.
Back in the good old days when,
So I don't know if I can say, I would say he is perhaps one of the fathers of modern day fandom and modern day science fiction, but it might have many more.
Yeah, of this type of genre. Obviously, fandom's been around, sports, et cetera, so.
So what are your hopes for the future of the franchise?
For me, Star Trek is very personal. And not to take it away from anyone else, I'm sure they have their own personal connections to it. But obviously, my father being who he was, me having the last name, and me being involved in the current Star Treks, it is very, very personal. And, what makes Star Trek, in my opinion, unique and different from not all sci-fi, but other sci-fi, is the messaging. This idea of a better future and how it inspires people to want that future for themselves and for everyone else in humanity. And what I want the future of the franchise is to continue that legacy. And I think many of the shows currently do that. But, there's often, everyone's constantly trying to evolve the shows, as they should. As times change, you need to evolve. The question is, which direction do you go? Do you make it more realistic? Is there more action, more substance? And that is sort of the tapestry that's woven with Star Trek, even today. And they have to find that. They have to find what makes Star Trek great and continues to stay great. So my hope is that the next 50 to 100 years, they continue finding the right path for Star Trek.
I hope that Star Trek continues to inspire, to bring forth ideas that are key to it, diversity and acceptance or celebration of the other, and keeps making sure that it is pushing itself also and not sitting on its laurels to figure out what is a good and healthy path for itself. Because I think that evolution is important, but I think doing so wisely is the key.
I feel like Star Trek's actually really unique as a franchise in kind of being able to do that. There's kind of a really unique push and pull with the fan base and like listening to the fan base when you do make mistakes. A lot of franchises don't do that, and kind of progressing your message and like keeping up with the times. Like, what allows you as a franchise to kind of, I don't know, be so special?
Can I just a quick anecdote that's related but doesn't necessarily answer the question? Because I think it's a great question, and I know Trevor has a great answer for it. But I remember an interview, well, not an interview, but we have video footage of my father getting up on stage in front of fans, I'm guessing in the late 80s, and saying, "You're under some sort of delusion that I make Star Trek for you. I make it for me." And it's sort of, even though he was kind of being humorous there, I think it brings up the point of, I mean, the artist, who does the artist make the art for? But it is a good question. Should Star Trek purely be made by the creators of it, or who's ever seeing it through their vision and only their vision, or listen to the fans? I love listening to the fans, but nowadays you live where there's so many different points of view that you make this fan happy, you're going to piss off this one. You make this fan happy, you're going to piss off. I mean, so it is, once again,
Yeah,
finding that middle
think
ground.
the answer probably lies, and it came from Gene a long time ago, and his willingness to listen to fans. And I think that that's bred into Star Trek to some extent. But I think Gene also, as everyone should, made his decisions. So I think the idea of anybody who you're looking at, whether it be a politician or a showrunner or a franchise in total, making sure that they are hearing the voices around them, making sure that they are taking them into account, listening for good ideas, not just having good ideas, is key to, I think, the best success you can find. But that doesn't mean that at the end of the day, someone who has been put in charge or given the reins of something doesn't have to, take all of that and make the best decision they can, even sometimes tough decisions as to something like the future of Star Trek.
My father wrote show Bibles, writer-director's guides. And to what Trevor's point here, you get the skeleton, the foundation, the basis of where the characters came from and that. So I think once you sort of have that in place, and one of his chapters in there was believability. And he gave examples of ideas that were believable and not believable and what's appropriate for the show and not. So once you have that framework, I think you could then weave within those lines. The next generation Enterprise, Enterprise D, compared to the regular Enterprise, if we realize the nacelles on the original Enterprise were higher up, and I believe the story is, the story is a fan wrote a letter to my father saying, if the nacelles were there and there was propulsion coming from the back, it would topple in space. And so that's why the nacelles on the Enterprise D are lower down in the central midsection of the ship, so that it actually had the correct momentum forward. And so, yeah, they listen to the fans when they are good ideas.
Yeah, I mean, I've always appreciated that. And, like, even with social issues, sometimes Star Trek has actually apologized rather than just silently changing.
We believe that, from Star Trek itself, growth comes from making mistakes and learning from them. And with that, there has to be acknowledgement of when one is made, probably. Yeah. So I think that for our purposes, when we feel like, and this isn't about a decision that's like popular or not popular, but if in fact a mistake has been made in some ways, I think that doing your best to rectify it and recognizing that happened is part of human nature.
I did want to know, you're both fans of Lower Decks, I'm assuming.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
Never heard of it.
do you have a favorite animated series reference in Lower Decks?
In the 70s, they were looking for Star Trek toys, and so someone came up with this helmet with a red siren on top, which was never in Star Trek, had nothing to do with Star Trek. I think it said Spock on front, and I, back then they were just looking for something to sell. I love the fact that in Lower Decks, they included that in an episode because of how absurd it was. And
for me, I'll say that, when the original animated series was made, while the only thing that was animated at the time were kids shows, to our understanding, it's not how Gene actually approached it. He didn't think of it as a kid's show. He thought of it as, this is a way that I can continue to tell the stories in this universe for anyone who likes this stuff to enjoy. And I think in that lies something that carries through to Lower Decks, in the sense that I think looking at Lower Decks and recognizing how it can be approached in that same way, and not trying to make it for anybody besides almost a psychological profile of people who would enjoy this show. And so I think it's a great thing that we've done actually in all the animation projects, is in order to achieve what we want, is not think about age as much as what is someone looking for, what would someone like, what is someone, the kind of thinker that might enjoy this stuff. And I think that's true in the animated series and in Lower Decks, Prodigy, and the like.
Let's not forget Prodigy. Prodigy is phenomenal.
Okay, I'm going to have to ask about Prodigy then, which that is actually my top Star Trek show.
Funny enough, it's up there for me too. It's hard to say top, but I have a very strong feeling for it. For me, it is the purest, and it may be somewhat simple, but, well, I won't say that. The sci-fi ideas are pretty strong too. It is great Star Trek. I mean, if anyone hasn't seen Prodigy, I'm not sure where you can, but you should see Prodigy. It is, as we've discussed, it's a great introduction into Star Trek. If anyone out there is sort of like, yeah, I've heard Star Trek my whole life, I haven't really seen it yet, I guess I'll watch it one day, Prodigy would be the one to start with, in, I think, our opinion. It's a great intro into Star Trek.
Yeah. So I think, I think that today's animation harkens back to hopefully things we've learned as an entertainment group, as consumers, as content makers when it comes to animation itself. And I think, it is no longer, obviously just for kids. That's not true of so much of animation today. And I think that animation is, even still slowly but surely gaining its reputation for, true, sincere content that it makes. So
yeah, even though it was put out on Nickelodeon, it is definitely not just for kids. Just anyone listening, watching.
We're back to Prodigy.
Sorry, Prodigy. Great sci-fi, as you know. I mean, the story where they were all in different times and time speeds, and I mean, just great sci-fi and how they work together as a team. It was just phenomenal.
But I know Aaron Walkie's been out saying you are shopping Prodigy.
Well, I mean, I'd love to take credit for that. The Star Trek entity, tier, team, Paramount, hopefully they are shopping Prodigy.
Okay, so Roddenberry Entertainment, that's not something your side really
not
confirms.
our decision.
Okay.
Above our pay grade.
Yes. Yes, but I am in favor of them shopping it as well. That show cannot go off the air. It is too good, and it's a shame that it's sort of where it is.
You hear that, CBS? Paramount? It's a good show.
They'll find a place for it.
Yes, I hope so. I do also want to know if you have a favorite character, for Rod, from the current era of Star Trek?
Current era of Star Trek.
The best characters that we seem to enjoy the most are those that allow us to step outside ourselves and look back at humanity. So whether it be Spock or Data or Saru or any of these characters, and some are human, some are not. The Doctor, the hologram Doctor. I think the ability for us to utilize these characters as mirrors and insights into the human condition is very powerful for us, and I think we find the most fulfillment when we get to enjoy that side of things.
And I just quickly, strangely enough, Michael Burnham, Sonequa did an incredible job with that character and all the changes that sort of that character had to go through. And of course, each season was very different. So, and she as a human being, she's phenomenal as well, but I think she did an incredible job with that character. And I have to say, you didn't ask me this, but I'm answering it. So I used to say Picard was my favorite captain, but I think Anson Mount is right up there now, at Pike. Just because of the way the character is portrayed, the way he does it. A true leader who I would be happy to serve under. Whereas Kirk, and I know I'll get hate mail for this, he would get us killed right away. I mean, when he's sleeping with the green slave girl on the planet whose father finds out later, I mean, they'd blow up the ship right away. So at least Anson, I think, would avoid that, as well as Picard. But
Has it been kind of special for you to see them expand on the cage more? And I mean,
I think so, yeah. I mean, yeah, it's nice. It was. I think it was a good move to go back and do the Pike years, and to do it the way they have. I'm excited for it.
and with number one, and with the
Yes, yes, having a chapel and a number one, and that's phenomenal.
And then what kind of other programs is the Roddenberry Entertainment Group kind of running right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we have a lot of different things we're working on outside of Star Trek as well. Most of these things, of course, are in the sort of science fiction and genre entertainment range, and looking at some things that Gene has left us, some jewels, if you will, or diamonds that we have mined, in addition to other things that have been either brought to us or developed internally. Our podcast network of shows is very, very strong. Some of them also have to do with, some of them also have to do with Star Trek, some do not. We just announced today that Den of Geek and Roddenberry Entertainment are joining forces for a show that is called Does It Fly? It is based on Gene Roddenberry's original question when Matt Jeffries was creating the Starship Enterprise. Gene really wanted it to fly. He wanted it to be real. He wanted it to feel believable and focus it on, engineering and physics and science of the time. And I think we are going to take that lesson, that question, and ask it of all of your favorite sci-fi, franchises and entities. And that should be launching this fall. So all in all, very busy and lots of stuff going on.
So it's a show that looks at sci-fi and asks, could this happen? Would this work? Is it possible?
It asks the question of scientifically, is this possible? It asks the question of, in the universe that was created it, is it possible, and does it stay true to that universe? And then, of course, the sort of silver bullet of it all, do we love it enough that we're just willing to give it a pass, even if it doesn't quite fly from the standpoint of everything else? And I think that's the key to great science fiction, is allowing people to not fall out of that world, not step back and say, wait a second, that felt wrong to me, that missed the mark, but to stay in and live in that world that you've created, so that they can be in those stories and those characters' lives.
Anything else coming up?
Lots of things that we are not allowed to talk about at the moment, but some things that we hope to be announcing later this year, and you should be seeing a lot more of us. Yeah.
And our regular Mission Log podcast, which has been going for almost 10 years now, is a fantastic way to complete your geekdom if you're a Star Trek fan, because you get to listen to people analyze the shows and do a little bit of what Trevor's saying, but you find out, what was the story about, what are the morals, myths, and meanings, maybe a little trivia, a little bit of poking some fun at it, but all in all, it's sort of what we do after any sci-fi show, whether it's Star Trek. Just sit down with your friends and discuss it. And so that's been going on for a while, but I'm excited for more of that.
Also, last time I spoke with you, you said you were trying to get your mother's voice developed into...
Yes. So technology moves sometimes slow, and it seems to have caught up where there is the technology now, where I think many of us have heard, where the good and bad as any of our voices can be synthesized for good or evil. And yes, so that is, we don't have a project in mind for it yet, but now it's possible. And so the voice of the computer, I don't think the voice of the computer is gone. I'm not hinting at anything, but I will make sure that wherever we can, we will make sure it's back.
Because you had recorded extra lines before her death, right, and stuff?
We did. So we have a library that back in the day wasn't as phonetically complete as it needed to be, but of course now with technology, the gaps can be filled in much easier.
I would love to have more voice, and hers and Bonnie, Belle's, and all the computers.
Yes.
Is there anything else you want to add before we end?
Not really. I mean, I think that, we're really happy to be here at Comic-Con. We love being around the fans. We love fans that love stuff, especially Star Trek or anything that Roddenberry is doing. And I think that we are branching out into things well beyond Star Trek as well that people will get to enjoy. If you are a fan of things and you want to know what celebrities out there love the way you love things, we have a Fanatics podcast that interviews celebrities and kind of finds out what they're digging or really into, that we're very, very proud of, as well as sort of an homage to fan culture and the fact that everyone's got their thing one way or another. So even your favorite celebrity is loving something.
Thanks so much, guys, for checking out our latest video. And also, huge thank you to our sponsors of San Diego Comic-Con 2023, Mad Cave and Global Comics.